What happens when a late-night host crosses the line from playful banter into personal attack territory? What unfolded on Jimmy Kimmel Live was an on-air disaster that left viewers stunned, and one of comedy's biggest stars walking off stage in frustration. Kevin Hart, known for his professionalism and his knack for handling any joke thrown his way, met his breaking point in what quickly became one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night history. The tension was unmistakable. The exchange turned sour, and by the end, the room felt nothing like the light-hearted atmosphere late-night audiences had come to expect. The night had started like any other. Hart was booked as the evening's main guest to promote his latest comedy special. Audience energy was high. Hart had made multiple appearances on Kimmel's show before, always delivering fun, easygoing interviews. But from the moment he stepped onto the stage, something was off. "Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Hart," Kimmel said with his usual theatrics. But there was a subtle bite to his tone, something seasoned viewers might have picked up on. Hart entered with his trademark energy, waving to the crowd and flashing his $1,000,000 smile. "Kevin, Kevin, Kevin," Kimmel began as they settled in. "Always good to have you back, though I gotta say, you look a little different tonight." "Different how, Jimmy? You mean more handsome than usual?" Hart joked, flashing a grin. The audience laughed, but Kimmel's reply was unexpectedly sharp. "No, I mean, you look tired. Really tired. Like, are you getting enough sleep, or are you just getting old?" The joke landed awkwardly. The laughter faded. Hart's smile wavered for just a moment. "I'm doing great, man," Hart said, brushing it off. "Been working hard, staying busy. You know how it is." But Kimmel kept pushing. "Working hard? Or hardly working? Because I heard about your last movie, and the box office numbers were, well, let's just say they weren't exactly record-breaking." The energy in the room shifted. It was no longer the playful ribbing that celebrities expect. Hart, clearly trying to stay composed, leaned on humor to redirect. "Hey, not every movie's a home run, Jimmy. That's why they call it show. Business, not show friendship, right?" Rather than taking the cue, Kimmel leaned in further. "But when you're getting paid $20 million a movie," he said, "don't you think audiences deserve more than just showing up and being short?" That last word, short, hit different. Hart had spent his entire career flipping height jokes into laughs, even self-deprecating ones. But Kimmel's delivery didn't feel playful. It felt like mockery. "Wow," Hart said, his tone cooling. "We're really going there tonight, huh?" "Going where?" Kimmel replied, playing innocent. "I'm just making conversation. Isn't that what you comedians do? Joke about everything?" "There's a difference between making jokes and being disrespectful, Jimmy," Hart said, his smile now completely gone. "We've known each other for years. What's this really about?" The room had grown stiff. Audience members shifted uncomfortably. Glances were exchanged behind the cameras. Nothing about this was scripted. Kimmel didn't ease up. Instead, he pressed further. "Look, Kevin, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Your career peaked a few years ago, and now it feels like you're just coasting on your past success. When was the last time you did something genuinely funny instead of just loud?" The words landed with a thud. The room went still. Kevin Hart leaned back slightly, taking a breath as he processed the insult. It hadn't been a jab. It had been a hit meant to wound. The audience sat in stunned silence, the atmosphere shifting from comedy to confrontation. "Jimmy," Hart said slowly, "I came here tonight to promote my work and have a good time with someone I thought was a friend. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't cool." "Oh, come on," Kimmel replied with a casual wave of the hand. "Don't be so sensitive. You dish it out in your comedy. Surely you can take it when someone serves it back. There's a difference between comedy and being cruel," Hart snapped, his voice rising just slightly. "Comedy brings people together. It makes them laugh. What you're doing right now, it's just mean." The tension rose. Any sense of lightheartedness was gone. The crowd, once cheering and clapping, now sat frozen. Kimmel had crossed more than one line, and Hart was clearly reaching the end of his patience. His voice carried not just frustration, but something deeper: betrayal. Kimmel, perhaps realizing the situation was spiraling but still unwilling to back down, pushed again. "Maybe the problem isn't that I'm being mean. Maybe the problem is that you can't handle the truth about where your career is right now." Hart stood. The shift in the room was immediate and absolute. A suffocating silence filled the space. Studio lights glared down on both men, but only Hart moved. He looked down at Kimmel, not with rage, but with unmistakable disappointment. The camera crew hesitated, unsure of what angle to capture. Audience members stared, mouths slightly open. Kimmel, for the first time, looked uneasy. "Sit down, Kevin," Kimmel said, but the force behind his voice was gone. "No," Hart replied, firm and measured. "What you're doing isn't conversation, Jimmy. What you're doing is trying to embarrass me on national television for your own entertainment, and I'm not going to sit here and let that happen." He remained standing, unmoving. Despite the difference in physical height, it was Hart who commanded the moment. Every person in the room felt the power shift. Kimmel let out a strained laugh. "Come on, don't be so dramatic. This is television, Kevin. People expect a little back and forth." "There's a difference between playful banter between friends and what you just did to me," Hart said, his voice now fully charged. "You attacked my career. You mocked my appearance. You questioned my talent in front of millions. That's not entertainment. That's just cruel." The murmurs in the audience began. Quiet at first, then spreading. Some were whispering, others pulling out phones. The realization was setting in. They were watching something that was never supposed to happen. Kimmel, visibly flustered now, tried to shift the blame. "Look, if you can't handle a little criticism, maybe you shouldn't be in this business. Comedy's about being able to laugh at yourself." "Don't lecture me about comedy," Hart fired back without missing a beat. "I've been making people laugh for over 20 years. I've sold out arenas. I've made films that brought joy to millions of families, and I've never had to tear someone else down to do it. What you're doing right now, it's not comedy. It's bullying." The word hit like a shockwave. It rang through the studio, undeniable and direct. Kimmel's face flushed red. His posture shifted. For the first time, the control he always held behind the desk seemed to evaporate. "I'm not bullying anyone," he said, his voice thinner now. "I'm just trying to keep the interview interesting." "Interesting?" Hart let out a bitter, disbelieving laugh. "You think humiliating your guests is interesting? You think attacking people who come here in good faith is good television? The only thing interesting about this is watching you show your true character, live on air." Hart began removing his microphone. Production crew scrambled in the background, unsure of what to do, exchanging frantic hand signals. This wasn't a sketch. It wasn't a bit. This was real, and spiraling out of control. "Kevin, wait," Kimmel finally said, his voice softer now, tinged with actual concern. "Don't walk off. We can move past this." Hart paused mid-motion, his fingers still on the microphone clipped to his jacket. He stared directly at Kimmel. "Move past this, Jimmy," he said, his tone cold but steady. "You just spent 10 minutes trying to tear me down for laughs. You questioned my talent, belittled my success, treated me like some washed-up nobody who should feel lucky just to be on your stage. Why would I want to move past that?" "Because this is live television," Kimmel replied, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. "Think about how this looks." "I am thinking about it," Hart said firmly. "And you know what it looks like? It looks like a man with enough self-respect to walk away when someone disrespects him. It looks like someone who won't trade his dignity for a few more minutes of airtime." The air in the studio had turned heavy. Hart wasn't just angry. He was hurt. And it was obvious this moment wasn't just about a single bad night. It was the boiling point after years of disrespect finally hitting the surface. Kimmel scrambled for control. "Fine," he snapped. "If you want to storm off like a child, go ahead. Just don't blame me when people say you can't handle the pressure." That was it. The final straw. Hart calmly removed the rest of his microphone and laid it on his chair. When he spoke again, his voice was low, but filled with a quiet power that silenced the entire room. "Jimmy," he said, "I've handled pressure you can't even begin to imagine. I've faced critics, failures, setbacks. My entire career has been about proving myself. But what I won't tolerate is being disrespected by someone I once considered a friend." He stepped toward the audience, his expression softening. Sorry you had to witness this tonight. You came expecting laughter, joy, a good time. Instead, you saw something ugly. That's not fair to you, and I apologize for my part in it." At first, the audience clapped hesitantly, but the applause grew, rising into a standing ovation. The energy in the room had shifted, no longer confusion or discomfort, but clear support for Hart. It was obvious who the crowd stood with. Kimmel, now visibly shaken, made one last attempt to salvage things. "Kevin, please, don't do this. Let's just finish the interview." Hart turned and looked at him one last time, his voice final. "There's nothing left to finish, Jimmy. You finished it when you chose to humiliate me instead of have a conversation." He began walking off stage. As Hart approached the exit, chaos erupted. The audience remained on their feet, many calling out encouragement, others booing Kimmel. It was no longer a show. It was a reckoning. "Kevin, wait!" Kimmel called out, standing behind his desk now. "This is ridiculous. You're overreacting." Hart stopped in his tracks. He turned slowly, disbelief etched on his face. "Overreacting?" he repeated. "Jimmy, do you even hear yourself? After everything that just happened, you're still trying to make me the problem?" "I'm just saying maybe you're being too sensitive about all this," Kimmel said, still oblivious to the shifting tide in the room. The audience erupted. Boos rang out. People shook their heads, and even some production staff looked away, visibly uncomfortable with their host's refusal to take accountability. Hart stepped back, onto the stage, not to sit, but to stand where everyone could see him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice clear and composed, "I want you to pay attention to what just happened. Jimmy spent 10 minutes mocking my career, my success, my character. When I defended myself, he called me dramatic. When I explained how that made me feel, he said I was being too sensitive. And now, even after all this, he's still trying to make me the villain." The room was silent again, all eyes fixed on Hart. This is what happens when someone in power thinks their platform gives them the right to humiliate others for ratings. This is what happens when someone mistakes cruelty for comedy. Kimmel, now clearly losing the room, tried a new tactic. "I was just trying to make interesting television," he said. "Sometimes that means pushing boundaries." "Pushing boundaries?" Hart repeated, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Jimmy, there's a line between pushing boundaries and crossing them. There's a difference between comedy and cruelty. What you did tonight wasn't edgy. It was petty. And it sure as hell wasn't funny." He turned away, leaving the stage, for good. And just like that, Kevin Hart exited, leaving behind one of the most uncomfortable, unforgettable moments in late-night television history. Hart turned back to the audience, his tone shifting to something calmer, more intimate. "I've been in this business a long time," he began, "and I've learned something important. How someone treats you when they think they hold the power. That tells you everything about who they really are." He gestured slightly toward Kimmel. "Tonight, Jimmy showed you exactly who he is." The audience erupted in another round of applause, louder this time. Not just supportive, but affirming. Hart stood in the moment with quiet strength, a masterclass in composure under fire. The contrast between his professionalism and Kimmel's flailing attempts at damage control couldn't have been more stark. Kimmel, clearly flustered, tried once again to salvage the moment. "Look, if I offended you, that wasn't my intention," he said weakly. "Can't we just move on and finish the interview?" Hart shook his head slowly. "Jimmy, you didn't offend me by accident. Every word you said tonight was deliberate, meant to humiliate, to belittle. You questioned my talent, mocked my appearance, dismissed my accomplishments, and you did it with a smile like it was some kind of joke. That wasn't a slip-up. That was a choice." Kimmel pushed back again. "But we're friends." Hart didn't hesitate. "Friends don't do what you did tonight. Friends don't try to tear each other down on national television. Friends don't sacrifice someone's dignity for a few laughs. What you did wasn't about friendship. It was about control, about using your platform to make me small so you could feel big." The audience sat in complete silence, the weight of Hart's words cutting through the air like a blade. This wasn't just about a single bad moment. This was about years of tolerating microaggressions, slights disguised as jokes, disrespect masked as comedy. Kimmel, finally beginning to sense the magnitude of the moment, made one final attempt. "Kevin, I'm sorry if I went too far. Can we please just sit down and talk about it?" Hart studied him for a moment. His anger had cooled into something colder. Disappointment. "The time to talk was when the cameras were rolling and you had a choice. To treat me like a guest or like a target. You made your decision then. You only want to apologize now because you see how bad this looks." He turned toward the exit but paused to address the audience one last time. "To everyone here tonight, thank you. I'm sorry this is what the evening became. You came for laughs, for joy, and you got something ugly instead. That's not on you, but I hope you walk away knowing this. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means walking away, even when it's hard." The crowd exploded into the loudest ovation yet. People were on their feet, cheering. Some had tears in their eyes. The message had landed. As Hart neared the edge of the stage, Kimmel blurted out one last plea. "Kevin, if you walk off this show, you'll never be invited back." Hart stopped and turned slowly. The look he gave Kimmel was withering. "After tonight?" he said, his voice ice-cold. "I wouldn't come back if you begged me. You showed me exactly who you are, and I want nothing to do with that. With That, Kevin Hart exited the stage to thunderous applause, leaving behind what would go down as one of the most unforgettable and uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. Kimmel stood behind his desk, stunned and visibly shaken. The rest of the show stumbled awkwardly forward, but the damage was irreversible. The audience, both in the studio and watching from home, had seen the truth play out live. Hart's walk-off became an instant cultural moment, a symbol of refusing to accept disrespect, no matter the setting or the stakes. It was a reminder that in an industry where mockery is often mistaken for wit, dignity still matters, and sometimes the most powerful punchline is silence and a walk away.